The mountain had taught Eli Grayson how to survive long before it taught him how to live. At 42, he lived alone in a hand-built cabin tucked deep into the pine-heavy spine of the Rockies, where winter stayed longer than it was. Welcome and silence could feel like a second skin. His beard was streaked with early gray, his hands scarred and thick from years of woodcutting, trapping and repairing things no one else wanted to fix. He came down to the valley town only when he had to. Supplies, mail, or the occasional job that paid in cash instead of favors. And every time he did, the same eyes followed him. The widows. Pretty ones. Lonely ones. Women who smiled too easily and laughed too loud, hoping the mountain man would notice them. Eli always looked past them, not out of arrogance, but exhaustion. He'd buried his wife 10 years, ago under frozen ground, after an avalanche took her from him. Since then, he had no interest in flirtation, pity, or being someone's fantasy of rugged salvation. What he noticed instead was the girl who never looked up. Mara Bell worked in the back of the general store, repairing torn feed sacks, mending jackets, and fixing whatever the town thought wasn't worth replacing. She was big, soft around the middle, thick in the arms. Her body shaped by comfort eating and years of being invisible. The town called her sweet, which was just a kinder way of saying overlooked. She dressed plainly, hair always tied back, eyes downcast but observant. When Eli brought in his ripped coat for the third winter in a row, she didn't flirt, didn't gush, didn't ask him about his scars or his loneliness. She just took the coat, fingers brushing the torn seam, and said quietly, "I'll reinforce it this time. It keeps tearing because the weight pulls wrong." It was the first time in years anyone had looked at him like a problem that could be fixed, not admired or feared. Over the following months, Eli found himself inventing reasons to come to town. A broken strap, a torn glove, a cracked buckle. Each time, Mara worked silently, her hands steady, her presence calm. She never asked about his past, never commented on his isolation. And somehow, that made him start talking anyway. About the cabin roof that leaked, about the way the mountain changed color before a storm, about how quiet nights could feel louder than gunshots. Mara listened like his words mattered, nodding softly, storing them somewhere safe. When winter came hard and early, Eli fell sick in his cabin, feverish and weak. He would have died there if Mara hadn't noticed he hadn't come for supplies in weeks. She climbed the mountain in boots too thin for the snow, carrying soup and stubborn determination. When he woke, shivering, her large frame was curled awkwardly beside the stove, feeding the fire, refusing to leave. She didn't cry. She didn't scold. She just stayed. And in that silence, something inside Eli cracked open for the first time since his wife spring arrived. Reluctantly, as if unsure it was welcome, but Eli felt it anyway, not in the thawing ground, but in his chest. Mara began visiting the cabin regularly, helping him repair walls, organize shelves, and patch the roof. She laughed more up there, away from town eyes, her laughter deep and real, unfiltered by self-consciousness. Eli noticed things he'd never been trained to value before, the way her presence softened his breathing, how her hands repaired more than cloth, how she never tried to be smaller than she was. When the widows began showing up at the cabin road under false pretenses, delivering pies, offering help, Eli didn't feel tempted. He felt irritated. None of them knew how to sit in silence without demanding something from it. Mara did. One night, during a storm that rattled the walls like old bones, Eli finally told her about the avalanche, about holding his wife's frozen hand, about choosing isolation over grief because grief felt endless. Mara didn't interrupt. She didn't try to heal him with words. She simply took his rough hand in both of hers and said, "You don't have to be alone to be strong." And that was the moment he chose her. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. The town didn't understand. Whispers followed them. Why her? Why not someone prettier, thinner, easier to show off? Eli didn't answer. He showed them instead. He stood beside Mara in public. He held her hand. He watched her confidence grow like a slow sunrise, warming places she thought were forever cold. And when he asked her to stay in the cabin for good, it wasn't a rescue. It was a partnership. She repaired his soul the same way she repaired cloth, patiently, quietly, reinforcing weak places until they held. And Eli learned something the mountain had never taught him. Love isn't found in what draws attention, but in what endures. Love did not arrive for Eli and Mara with fireworks or sudden certainty. It arrived like the mountain's first green after a brutal winter. Quiet, stubborn, undeniable. Life in the cabin settled into a rhythm neither of them rushed to name. Mornings began with shared coffee and chipped mugs, evenings with repaired tools laid neatly by the door, and nights with the sound of wind brushing the walls instead of clawing at them. Mara changed in ways the town would never understand. Her shoulders straightened. Her laughter came without apology. She stopped shrinking herself, stopped believing love was something she had to earn by being useful or invisible. Eli watched this transformation with awe and a strange ache, realizing how much of her strength had always been there, just waiting for a place where it could exist safely. When tragedy struck the valley, an early storm trapping travelers, a barn collapse that injured children, it was Mara who organized food, clothing, and shelter, and Eli who stood beside her, not above her, not in front of her, but with her. The same townspeople who once whispered now watched in silence as they became something solid, something dependable. One night, months later, Eli built a small fire outside the cabin, stars spilling across the sky like promises. He handed Mara a simple ring, made not of gold but hammered steel, imperfect and strong. He told her he didn't choose her because she fixed him, but because she saw him broken and stayed anyway. Mara cried then, not from doubt, not from fear, but from the deep relief of finally being chosen without conditions. The mountain, which had taken so much from Eli, bore witness as he gave something back, his heart, fully and without shame. And if this story reminded you that real love doesn't shout, doesn't chase beauty, doesn't need approval, if it reminded you that healing happens quietly, between two people who choose each other every day, then subscribe to this channel. More stories like this are coming. Stories about love that endures, stories about souls that find home when they least expect it.